If you find you're unsettled listening today, reach out to a trusted friend or go to tradespodcast.com and click on resources.
We are men in the trades, forging health in the drug poisoning crisis. This is
Off the Clock Toolbox Talk.
We're here today back with Kale Moth, one of our fan favorites. And welcome back, Kale.
Thank you, Karen. It's been an honor for you to be able to ask me to come back on here today. To be able to deal with Off the Clock Toolbox Talk has been a blessing in my life. And it's definitely spread around a lot, especially in the community that I'm in. I've seen a lot of people reaching out and taking some serious acknowledgement into what we're doing here today with our guest. I'm more than honored to be here with her as well today too.
And it's the end of a long 12-hour day, so you're weary, but you're here. So we appreciate that. We're here to talk about grief today. And you are connected to our guest, Julie Cochrane. Hi, Julie. Thanks for also being with us today.
Hi, Karen, and hi, Kale. And Kale is a fan favorite, but I mean, next to my own kids, this young man is, my heart, and he's definitely a favorite in my life.
Through my journey with recovery, I was given an opportunity that changed my life. And, just to be able to say that was 6 years ago, I just celebrated my 6 years of sobriety.
Congratulations.
On May 7th here. Thank you very much. And the lady here that is with us today, she was a huge part of that. She was part of the family that gave me a chance to have my life back and to be able to go through the Cody Anders Memorial Scholarship Fund and to have a spot in a treatment center to take on life and have a fresh spot to restart and say, I can grab life and take a hold of it and really move forward and do something positive. And she was there from day one. Her and her family were very much a blessing in my life at that time. So to be able to go through that, my cousin Cody, this is his stepmother. So unfortunately, he's passed away. And with that, the opportunity for me to go to treatment was available. And Julie here has been amazing. Even after coming out of treatment, she's stuck beside me every step of the way. There's been good times and hard times, and it's been a blessing the entire way. So thank you again, Julie, for that. But now I still get to go and visit her regularly as much as possible. Being in Saskatchewan, I try and visit her in BC as much as I can. But this is Auntie Julie to me, so it's been great.
And I can't tell you, this young man, Kale, he's kind of boots on the ground in his community and has made that kind of his mission in life because he's thankful for his own life. I can't tell you how many phone calls I've had from him where someone else he's reached out to, whether someone he was just trying to help or someone he's known personally, has lost their life. Like sometimes like 2 or 3 within a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's what we had actually when we first recorded Kale's story, and we didn't include it in his actual story at the time. But I remember, Kale, you saying that, you actually really needed to come on and talk about your story because you had lost 2 people to overdose or drug poisoning, as I call it, because they're not really overdoses. They're poison drug supply. And you'd lost a 3rd person to suicide that week. And I was just like, holy fuck. Yeah. Like
that was a rough go. Yeah, I think in the last 5 years, directly like impacting me personally, people I've worked with and friends and people that I consider really close to me. I think we're at like 23 people I've lost now.
23 for you alone.
Yeah, it's bad. Unfortunately, in Saskatchewan here, the numbers have doubled in the overdoses and the accidental drug poisoning. And we don't have any resources. It's being that tough, rugged side of things. People don't want to make that change. And we're losing too many people. And unfortunately, there's nothing that's really being done. And that's why I'm trying to advocate so hard for it and work so hard to push for it. And it's exhausting. It really is. And sometimes, you feel like, hey, is this worth it? And then I got to take a step back and dial myself in and say, yeah, absolutely it is. Because there was a time, 6 years ago, that's not very long ago, where I was sitting there and I said, you know what, I'm never going to change. Like, this is who I am, and this is the way it's going to be. And man, was I wrong. This is
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm able to be here today. And it's unfortunate to see that there's so many young people, especially, for myself, I'm only 25 years old, and the people that I've lost are within, maximum of 5 year plus or minus of my age. Like that's a lot of young adults to children. Like there's some young people that are taken way too soon from us. And unfortunately, the other side of it is only one of them was a female. And that should speak volumes as to what, it's kind of stating towards men. Like why is it ruled out to that point, is where men are struggling so badly and they're battling their demons, and there's nothing that they feel like they can do to reach out for help, and the opportunity, they aren't getting clear enough, or just seems that the doors are maybe closed in front of them. They don't have a step forward. And the pain and struggle they go through. And the only option is to try and cure it with some false happiness, some sense of joy, and they turn to the wrong place. And unfortunately, it's taking all of them away from us.
And Julie, you also professionally, you work in the psychology industry as well, correct?
Well, yeah, I work in mental health. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. I've kind of come full circle. Psychology was my background, but I went into the business world. But Cody's, my stepson's, my son, we don't use the word step in our family. His journey led me back to kind of where I began my roots, and was a big piece of why I do the work I do, especially because I wanted to work with young men who struggled with mental health. We all know the stats of, how many men to women pass due to drug harms.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason for that. We don't make it socially acceptable for our boys, our men, our young men to raise their hand and say, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
Right. And so I wanted to be part of the upstream solution. And I'm also part of Mom Stop the Harm. And, I've learned so much over the last 6 years. And Cody passed April 1st, 2018. I was starting to learn before he passed, but I wish I knew then what I know now.
So many things in there that I'd love to follow up on. One of them is just thank you for being a hypnotherapist, because it's an alternative form of therapy, maybe a little bit different from regular talk therapy. And one of the things that has come up as a theme in season 2 of this podcast was that there's few services that feel accessible to men in the trades and young men in general. And a lot of the mental health services that do exist are more clinical settings, and they're just such a different world and such a different culture than where most young men and or men in the trades are at. They just can't connect to those services, or they find they have great difficulty connecting to them. So
or they don't feel safe within it, right? And like a lot of men, a lot of them that I work with, they just want to get to the other side of whatever they're struggling with quickly.
Yeah.
And I fully value talk therapy. My daughter, Nicole, is a psychologist. She works in the VA down in Las Vegas. And unfortunately, she can't join us tonight, but I think you're going to interview her and, maybe a few weeks down the road.
Yeah, we are.
This is the one she wrote about our journey, our family journey, her journey, Cody's journey.
Yeah. 100 Goodbyes, it's called. And I actually just read it a couple days ago, and I was so moved by it. And I really appreciate, I felt like I really got a glimpse into who Cody was, and just so much appreciated. She's a clinical psychologist and is struggling through her grief journey. She knows everything you need to know.
Knows it all, right?
Yeah.
And I remember when her first day, she was supposed to go back to work after Cody passed a couple of weeks afterwards. And she FaceTimed me because she was sitting in her car in the parking lot and in tears and saying, I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah.
We talked about it. She goes, I don't want to go in there and have everyone look at me weird and just say the things that I don't want to hear today. And we both decided, it'd be great if we could have a t-shirt that just said, I'm not okay today. And that's okay. Right?
Oh my God, yes. Somebody market this t-shirt.
It's like it's something to take the pressure off everybody from having to say something, right?
Yeah. And if you can obviously search the book 100 Goodbyes by Dr. Nicole Anders. But if you want to go to tradespodcast.com and click on the resources section, and we have it listed in that section as well. If you've lost somebody and you just don't know what to do with all the feelings that you're feeling, it's a great way to engage. And it's so easy to consume as well. It's not overbearing, it's not overwhelming. And that's the thing with grief. It's so overwhelming and we can't control it, and it does what it does, and you just have to feel it.
Well, yeah, any kind of grief, any kind of loss, right? But
yeah.
As a parent, I think the loss of a child is the ultimate grief, because it's out of order somehow, right? That's not supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it just hits you in the face like a gut, beyond a gut punch. And everybody goes through it differently. I went through it very differently than my ex-husband, who, our marriage didn't survive this. And so we had very different ways of going through it. And he had his own journey and I had my own journey. For me, I felt like I had to be in action. Like the very first thing I wanted to do, like the week after Cody passed, was I wanted to find one of those naloxone kit things that I'd been hearing about.
Yep.
That's all I knew at that point. I didn't know anything else that I could do other than get my hands on one of those kits. I didn't even know what I was going to do with it, but that's something I felt I could do. And I went to a meeting of one of the local community action teams here in BC that's provincially mandated, to the one out in South Surrey, White Rock. They had just started theirs at that time. And I connected with some amazing people, some amazing caring people out there, and became part of that group. And I'm still part of that group. That was my journey, everybody has their own journey. Some people, I know many people who have lost a loved one to drug harms, and they don't want to talk about it because of the stigma and shame. Sometimes I scan the local paper and see a young person who's passed, and I'll see, some vague reference, and I'm like, okay, I know it happened that way. Most people wouldn't realize it, right? But it's you come to know when you see it.
Well, this is the thing. So, we've lost upwards of 14,000 people in the province of British Columbia to drug poisoning now. And there's way more, like for each one of those people, there's at least 10 or 20 people who are heavily grieving those loss, probably way more than that. So the grief is exponential on that 14,000 number. But few people, I will say, feel the permission or the ability or the okayness to say that they lost their child to drug poisoning, because there's so much shame attached to it. There's so much stigma attached to it. And people judge other people. And, I have a little bit different experiences in my family. I have a child with profound special needs who acts and looks very differently in public, and we get lots of looks all the time. And even my close family members, who I know love me very much, have admitted that, like, yeah, we've quietly judged you, thinking that, oh, you did something wrong, or, you didn't do something right, like you missed something, right? And so there's all these little judgment pieces that we have of each other and of the parents and of the families when we lose someone to drug poisoning. So because of that, families either don't say anything, like you said, you read these obituaries and it doesn't say how they died, but clearly they were too young to die, or there, isn't any signs of disease or anything like that. I'm overwhelmed by the idea that families can't even grieve their loved ones properly because of the stigma that's attached to it.
That's a really tough piece. It was probably about a year after Cody had passed, and I was asked to speak. It was International Overdose Awareness Day, or I think it was the day before, and one of the local cemeteries was having a memorial to those who had passed from drug harms. And it was so interesting, all the families that showed up, because it was kind of like a private place where they could come to grieve together. It is something that they don't talk about, because there is that stigma and shame. Like my own journey through this grief with Cody, it's very different than my ex-husband's, because I wasn't there when he was born. I wasn't there when he was young. He didn't come into my life until just before he turned 16. So my relationship with him, even though we were super close, was obviously not the same as that of his dad. And so I honor that journey, that grief journey that his dad is very different from mine. Everyone has their own journey through it. Nicole and I don't know if we were just naive or what. We didn't know to hide, right? We were very vocal. Like I can remember being in a restaurant a number of months afterwards with a couple of family members. And I know in particular my mom, I was talking about something and I just needed to talk about it because I just needed to get it out. And the things I was angry about, I was angry, right? I was super angry. Cody died in rehab,
Yeah.
right? Place where you think, oh, finally, they've got him. He's safe for a while. Hopefully this will be the time. Not thinking any possibility on the planet that he could still be in harm's way, right? And so I was so angry. And I was talking while we were in this restaurant, and my mom kind of wanted me to keep it down. And that this more angry, right? I said, you know what, Mom, I will stand on this damn table and scream from the rooftops if it means someone else doesn't have to be going through what we're going through right now. Because that was the thing that killed me. That waking up every day, because I had zero idea of the numbers. Until you're in it, you don't understand it. It's not in your realm, right? I had no idea how many people were dying every day. And it's even worse now, obviously. And that's what brought me to my knees every morning, was knowing how many families were going to wake up that day to the same grief that we were going through.
Yeah.
And nothing seemed to be nothing was happening about it. Why weren't people angry about this?
Yeah.
This is your kids, this is your loved ones, this is your spouse, your friend. My anger is a little more subdued now mostly because it's exhausting. Like, it really is exhausting to think that this continues. Like you said, over 14,000 in our province. I can't remember. It's over 40,000 in the whole country.
Like my brain can't even comprehend those numbers. If you're thinking like a stadium full of people, all gone.
Do you imagine if there was anything else going on that was preventable that had that many people dying and no one's screaming from the rooftops about it? That's what stops me from sinking into the grief of it all, is I have to be in action in some way.
I agree with that. Yeah. To touch a little bit more with what Julie was saying there, when one of my coworkers, a friend of mine I grew up with, he lost his brother to an accidental overdose. He felt so much shame, and he's always been the tough guy, and he just had to suffer by himself because he was so worried that if he told anybody, especially being in the environment that we work in, if he told anybody that he would be judged or that it would just be the harsh negative comeback of the stigma that he would have to deal with. And so eventually he opened up and told me, and to be there and actually help him through a time where he needed somebody the most. It was a relief for him as well. Like, he needed it badly. And after a little bit, people had kind of figured out what had happened, and through obviously voicing the way that I am with people and the way that I look at the stigma behind addiction, recovery, and unfortunate side of overdose, the crew was very, very accepting of it, and they showed so much support for the guy, and he himself, like, he just felt this inside shame and this internal battle that he didn't want to have to reach out, because he didn't want to feel weak in any way, shape, or form. He figured, I can do this on my own. And it sometimes makes it a lot worse. You can almost magnify the pain and the grief by tucking it in and not allowing yourself the time to heal and to heal properly.
Kale, one of my favorite lines from your story, what you were talking about, how you got to feed yourself every day. And, when I think about working through grief, you're going to need something probably different every day, depending on where you're at. And probably most people are familiar with the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I know Nicole really emphasizes in her book, 100 Goodbyes, that there's no order to them. and they come and go in different stages at different times. And when I think about navigating those 5 stages, that whole concept of feeding yourself, like, what do you need right now to get through? And I think for for the first hours, it's just breathe, right? And drink water.
Yeah.
I would, caution Kale about that when he would call me with these horrendous situations. And I would say, sweetheart, maybe it's time just to take a step back. Like, it really is the oxygen mask in the airplane, right? You're not going to be good to anybody if you are constantly feeling beaten back and beaten down by this. Because the reality is, Kale has made a huge difference in his community. And so much of this is out of his control.
Mm-hmm.
It's out of most of our controls. And there are times, I know I've had times when I've had to step back. If someone asked me to go speak or go and do an event, I've had to step back and say, you know what, right now I need to take care of me.
Mm-hmm.
I need to care of family. I need to whatever, right? And we do have to remember to do that, especially if we're, taking an advocacy role in this or just being support for other people. You really do have to remember to take care of yourself. I have a best friend who she even reminded me before I came on tonight. She's like, call me afterwards. I want to check in with you.
Mm-hmm.
That's how heavy it is for me. I can speak the stats, I can speak to all kinds of stuff, but when it's about our family, it's a whole different thing, right? Tomorrow, I am going to a celebration of life, and it's for the son of one of my best friends, and he lost his battle in February. So it can happen anywhere, it can happen to anyone. Sometimes it's out of the blue, it's a shock. Sometimes it's almost a preparing for, that phone call. That in our case, it was police knocking on our door. That's so outside of most people's realm of reality,
Yeah.
but those kinds of memories are kind of burnt in. And I'll never forget, those police officers bringing my husband and I into this room, into my office. And, so we could have some privacy. My other 2 sons, my mom, were in the other room because we'd just been out for Easter brunch.
Mm-hmm.
It was that kind of a Sunday. And it was such a shock. I can remember my ex-husband asking the police officer to repeat, like, no, he's in rehab. You don't understand. And, the whole drug poisoning thing, the toxicity of what's out there. We know from how they found Cody in the rehab home, and they found him in his bathroom in the morning. And they know from how they found him that he thought he was taking heroin, which was his drug of choice. But there's literally no heroin left on the streets of Vancouver.
Yeah.
When the autopsy came back, pure fentanyl. That was all that was in his system. That's not what he thought he was taking. It's just so nonsensical. And now that supply is even tenfold worse with all the other crap that's in there.
Yeah.
We really just have to do something. It feels like we're rolling a boulder uphill because, there's this been weaponized politically.
Yes.
And there's this big thing about, well, we have to provide more rehab. No, we have to provide safe supply. It's not an either or. We need both. We need to keep people alive until we can get them to that place.
Mhm.
Even if every single person who is using substances, we could get them on safe supply, or even if they all wanted to go into rehab, there's no room. There's no room. There's no access. So it's totally unrealistic for people to say, oh, they just have to stop what they're doing and they have to go to rehab. It doesn't work like that. And we all know it has to come from the person who is on that journey. I was talking to someone who's an accountant the other day. He was very numbers oriented. And I showed him the numbers of how many people pass every year from medical issues that come out of obesity and smoking cigarettes and a couple other things, way more than what's happening with drug harms. And yet we don't think that we have to force people to go on a diet to lose weight. We would never consider forcing people to stop smoking. but the toll that that takes on our economy
Mhm.
is enormous. But for some reason, there is this moral high ground that people take with substance use and about how they don't want to pay for it because they can just stop. Like there's so much, I don't know if it comes from a place of fear.
Yeah, it does. When we experience fear, that's when we start grasping for certainty. And that comes from Brene Brown research. There's got to be rights and wrongs. There's got to be ways to get through this. There's got to be, nobody wants to be an enabler. And then we have so much left over from the tough love movement of the 80s. And that's still going pretty strong. And I think once again, that's about certainty. If I draw these hard lines and give these really firm boundaries, then I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And the problem is that it's complicated to provide that unconditional love. It is and it isn't, because it's just unconditional love. But at the same time, it's emotionally complicated to keep providing that when your loved one is just struggling and struggling and struggling. And in Sean's story, which is the episode previous to this one, Daniel talks about how the average person who's addicted to opioids struggles with their opioid addiction for 10 to 15 years. And on average, it takes 5 to 7 attempts at recovery before wellness really starts to emerge in longer periods.
Right.
And it makes me think about how this overdose crisis or this drug poisoning crisis also affects everyone from every walk of life. Because as I was reading through Cody's story in 100 Goodbyes, or what was told of his story, the Anders family was not wanting for anything. They weren't a homeless group of people. They had resources, and they grew up well within those resources. And it sounds like Cody had a fairly successful business, and it sounded like he, was wearing the right clothes and driving the right cars and doing all that stuff. So I think in the media, it's really portrayed quite a bit that people who are homeless, or people that are, have really dysfunctional, like the old 80s sitcom Married with Children, like, that kind of a dysfunctional setting. And it's not just that, it includes everybody. Like, it doesn't matter where you're from or what kind of assets or resources that you have. It really does affect every single person. And I was really interested when you were originally talking about how neither you and Nicole are, both involved in the mental wellness industry and are experts in it. And neither of you really understood what was going on. And, Nicole referred in the book, she's like she knew he was using sometimes, but she didn't realize the severity to which things were happening.
Cody, like so many others, started experimenting in high school, right?
Yeah.
And, even his best friend in high school has a lot of guilt around that time in their lives where he was experimenting with them, because he's taking on, well, what part am I responsible for? But Nicole has had some deep conversations with him to try to alleviate his guilt around that, right?
Yeah.
I always say addiction is not a private storm. It's a tornado that takes out everyone in its path, because, everyone goes, well, what if I'd done this? And Nicole, in her book, she talks about, well, what if I'd done this? What if I'd done that? Did I do this wrong? The one thing I am so grateful for is we did do a shift as a family in how we approached Cody, because there was a lot of tension points where, there wasn't communication, and because we weren't understanding it. Plus, he was so far away at that point. We just made a shift just to keep on reaching out. We didn't really care if he answered, but just for him to know we were there.
Yeah.
And for him to know that we were going to be there whenever he needed us. And that's not enabling. And I hate that word, because as parents, we're not we're worried about our kids. I have lots of friends, if their kids are down in the downtown east side, they'll take them, out for a meal. They'll even give them some money, and people can't even understand that. But it's just, it's not enabling. It's like you're just helping your kid try to survive. But because there was that softening toward Cody, then he knew that we were there for him. And he knew that he was choosing this time to go on this journey, but he also knew he had our support.
Mhm.
So the last time we saw him, we had gone to visit him at the rehab place, and we left him with hugs and I love yous. And that part I'm so grateful for, because so many people don't get that.
Moms Stop the Harm has a couple of groups to help people out. There's one group for parents that have kids that are currently using substances, and that one is called
Holding hope.
Holding Hope. And then there's another one that's called Healing Hearts for parents that have lost kids or family to drug poisoning itself, because the journey. It's like exactly what you said earlier, Julie. Everybody who's there understands, and there's no shame, and there's just togetherness, I guess.
Yeah.
Kale, do you want us to maybe tie up with how do you feed yourself? How do you take care of yourself? How do you notice when you're experiencing grief and loss? What does that look like for you? Like how do you read that off your body and be like, oh, got to do some self-care there? What does that look like?
Well, for myself, I notice that I kind of tuck myself away a little bit. I'm usually a very outgoing guy. I have a lot of energy. And when I feel like I'm always bothering somebody, or maybe I'm being annoying, I start catching myself, and it's okay. Now, why am I trying to conceal myself away, or why am I not trying to portray myself in my normal manner? Because inside, it's like I'm trying to deal with something and I can't get my mind off it. I kind of shut myself away from people, and it becomes worse because I love being outgoing, but I can't do it because there's the internal battle you face is you're always going to be battling yourself, and it's not easy because when it's just you versus yourself, that battle goes on for a long time. It's like it's somebody either has to give up or you're gonna have to sort it out. And that's to understand yourself, your being, where you sit mentally, and when you can get a grounded, like a good grounding on yourself and understand, okay, something's not right. This isn't how I usually am. Or maybe today isn't great, but I'm still doing good. I need to take a step away from, okay, maybe there's struggles that are going on in relationships. Maybe, because it can be anything. It can be work, it can be whatever. There's sometimes you got to realize, okay, what is causing this issue? What is the root cause of this? And to be able to understand that and to focus on, okay, I need to do what's best for me. If I have to take a step away, or if I need to have some space for myself, if that means going for walks or reading, it could be something as simple as just dialing yourself in, really understanding just, okay, I'm here. This is where I am. I'm okay right now. Who can I reach out to? Usually it's Auntie Julie. And sometimes you're sitting there crying, freaking out and saying, hey, I really need you right now. And sometimes it's like, hey, you know what? Today was hard. But having a support system for you that you can trust and you can really turn to in that time is huge, because just like trying to take on that battle by yourself is next to impossible. You'll always think that, oh yeah, I've got it figured out, but it never really sorts itself out on its own. You have to get somebody else's kind of opinion, their viewpoint on it as well, and take in as much as you can. I know this, like even for myself, this last little while, things have been hectic and crazy for me, and I'm usually trying to run all over the place, and on the weekends I'm trying to go back to the farm and visit and be with family and friends and kind of go everywhere. But this last little bit with work being stressful and trying to get stuff figured out for my life and the events that are coming up, I've chose that this weekend, I'm going to stay home. This is going to be time for me. I'm here by myself. It's just time to relax. I need to dial in what I need to do, give my brain a bit of a break and focus on, okay, this is for me. This isn't me focusing on anybody else. And that's kind of where I try and help others with understanding as well.
Just adding to that, even when I work with someone who's struggling with addiction, one of the very first things I talk to them about is getting that support system around them. What I call boots on the ground. I don't care where in the world they are. They need that boots on the ground support system to hold them when they need it, right?
Mhm.
Because you can't do it by yourself. It's beyond hard to do it by yourself and to think that you can. And that support system might not be family, and sometimes it's definitely not family.
Yeah.
You have to tap into either close people around you or groups, like the Mom Stop the Harm group.
Yeah.
For that kind of support. Those aren't people in addiction. Those are people who are, either have someone dealing with it or they've lost someone. But there are other groups like that. People are having to turn to substances for their pains and things because we have gotten so far away from community,
Yeah.
away from connection, that we don't necessarily have those trusted people to turn to when we are struggling, right?
Yeah.
So I have lots of people who will call me or message me and say, so-and-so's struggling or so-and-so's grieving. They've just lost someone. I don't know what to do. What do I do? And I'm like, there's nothing to do. You're not going to fix it. You're not going to change it. Just show up.
Mhm.
Show up. Make a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Just decide. Let them talk. Let them say that person's name out loud. Let them pour everything out. Just show up, and not just once. Keep on showing up for that person.
Thank you so much for joining us, both Kale and Julie. Julie, if people want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Julie at juliecochrane.com.
Family members, we keep track of who's all listened to which episodes, and currently the little brother-in-law, he's got every single episode listened to, so it's awesome to hear that. I'll give him a little shout out there. Thank you again, Julie, for being here. You've been,
I'd do anything for you in a heartbeat.
no one else I would have rather done this with.
Off the Clock Toolbox Talk has been a Fraser House Society project, executive produced and co-hosted by Karen Jansen, managed by Delan Young on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples. Production of this material has been made in part through a financial contribution from Health Canada. The views expressed herein do not necessarily reflect the views of Health Canada or Fraser House Society. The content of this podcast is conversation between people with living experience and should not be taken as professional advice. Special shout out to Mom Stop the Harm, who are an integral partner in this podcast project, momsstoptheharm.com. Help save lives. Go to tradespodcast.com and click on the link under Enter to win a $200 grocery card. When you fill out the survey, you help us understand what's working and what's not. Each survey for each episode listened to is a separate entry. Information collected is for survey purposes only and is not shared. Help us, help you.